Hello, bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai. Welcome to episode 25 of Little Things for Bonsai People, formerly Bonsai Southeast. This time I am joined by Mike Lane. It's been a moment. He's been out doing his bonsai thing. How's it going, Mike?
It's going great. I'm happy to be back. Happy to be back in the U.S. and to be home for a month.
Awesome. We're going to catch up with you in just a moment after we get through our patron list. I'd like to thank our patrons, of course, our amazing patrons from patreon.com. You can go become a bonsai best bud over at patreon.com/little things for bonsai people. I'd like to thank Tori Solis, Warehouse Rat, Boyd Snellgrove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers, Ryan Gliardano. I think I got it that time. Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia, and the ladies at the flower market. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys for so much for supporting the show. Happy birthday to everyone whose birthday it is today, because I keep forgetting to ask specific bonsai dates. Oh, not bonsai, birthday dates. This is a bonsai show, though. If you'd like to follow, subscribe to any of our social media accounts, you can go over to underhillbonsai.com and you can look at some of the articles I've written. You can go to Facebook to go follow me there, Instagram to go over to Little Things for Bonsai People and check out our Instagram feed. We have a couple of trees that we critiqued that were shared on there, and you'll see on the descriptions what episodes they are linked to. For Mike, you can go over to kitsunebonsai.com and you can go check out his merch. You can go check out information about booking him to come do classes in your local area. He does a lot of classes in Florida. Like Mike said, he's been traveling around the U.S. teaching classes and giving demonstrations. For Carmen, you can go check out the purplepot.society.org. Go check out the Women's Bonsai National Club. Awesome material, awesome resources, $35 a year. It's a great deal. And then all of our episodes been edited by Matt O'Donnell. He's our really awesome editor. He's a bass player and music producer out of Nashville, Tennessee. He makes our podcast sound great. He makes us sound smart. Thank you so much, Matt, for editing this podcast. If you want to check him out, Instagram, Matt O'Donnell, or you can go to his website, mattodonnell.com, and he has a contact form on there. If all you can do is listen and just make sure you subscribe on whatever listening platform you're on. That really helps the algorithm. We are at a good number of subs. I think we hit 60 subscribers. That's awesome. Thank you so much, guys. If you sub and then you put the notifications on, you can see when the newest Little Things for Bonsai podcast episode comes out and keep up to date with us. We're on a weekly schedule, finally. This feels good. We're on a roll. So where have you been, Mike? We have missed you. Well, we don't have Carmen here this time, unfortunately, but we have missed you on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I went to India and was there for a while, and then came back and was doing some work on the other coast of Florida, and then did 3 cities in Texas. And so now I'm getting to spend April local, within Florida at least, and start traveling again in May. But it's been a lot of learning, a lot of teaching, and pretty fun experiences so far.
Excellent. Yeah, you normally do Texas about every year, maybe a couple of seasons. Do you do the seasonal tour?
Yeah, I've done the tour, and I've also been going out there the last few years to teach separate programs. But recently, I've had a few different cities, a few different groups sign up for my advanced Shohin course, and that's basically meets 4 times a year. And so I've got one actually starting in Baton Rouge here soon. So in June, I think. So.
Yep. I've actually been talking to some of the Bonsai Club members out here, and they're pretty excited for you to come by. That's going to be, I know that you're supposed to be here later this month or next month.
Yeah. I'm coming for something separate, a different thing, but yep. I will be there for the Shohin thing in end of June, I believe.
End of June. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And how's it been, life with Evan been? You've been out at Hagedorn's and.
Oh yeah. I was at Hagedorn's earlier. Dude, there's been so much stuff going on. I can't remember when that was. For the listeners out there who've been tracking our movements, I was recording an episode at the Apprentice House with Carmen. I think that was back in late February. And then I came back and went to Texas as well, went to Austin. I love Austin Bone Society. They rock out there. Talked to some San Antonio peeps. They want to have me out soon. I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, some good traveling stuff going on. I know we're still looking forward to
Laurent.
Darrow coming out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually got a couple of people signed up for that class already in October coming up. It's going to be a great time. And yeah, we should be expecting to have Laurent later on. I think closer to when he's here, but that will be a little nice little guest feature in the future.
Yeah.
So
I figured in the next few months or so, I'd have him come on and talk. But he's got a few YouTube videos out people can check out. You could always order the book off kitsunebonsai.com and kind of keep abreast of the everything new in the cosmic bonsai world.
Yeah. And for the listeners out there who are not aware, you can go to Kitsune and pick up Cosmic Bonsai 1 and 2. It's the first time it's been printed in the United States. And thanks to Mike, he is distributing the book. It's really awesome. So may have mentioned it in the past, but it's worth mentioning again because it's innovative bonsai. It's great stuff.
It really is. Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's like one of the things I keep telling people is it's not a replacement for bonsai. It's an analog. It's something that I'm not going to go replace all my trees with cosmic bonsai, but it certainly is like a way to work outside the box and to come up with some really creative compositions.
Yeah, he really does. A lot of experiment with not only just his compositions, but his display models as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, we touched on that earlier on about kind of the Mobius inspired kind of feel to the robots and the kind of just bubbly type retro futurism kind of stuff he uses. So yeah.
It's very cool.
Very cool stuff. But yeah, we had a request from a listener to kind of get a little bit of the opinions, deep, not so much of a deep dive. We do what we can with our time today on tiger bark ficus and tropicals in particular. I know it's been a long time coming. We've talked about tropicals in the past, but somebody in particular was asking about tiger bark. So give us a rundown on tiger bark. We can kind of get some nuances out of the species a little bit.
Well, it's a Eurostigma fig, meaning that Eurostigma figs are figs that start their life as epiphytes, meaning that a fig is eaten by a bird. The bird then defecates that seed somewhere else, and the tree begins its life almost like an orchid, usually high up in a tree, where it doesn't have any roots in contact with soil. So it begins life epiphytically. And that's useful for us horticulturally when dealing with them as bonsai, because you will use the aerial roots for several different techniques, and only Eurostigma figs grow aerial roots. So like a traditional fig plant does not grow aerial roots, does not start its life as an epiphyte. So tiger bark is a variant of Ficus microcarpa. And so people used to call it Ficus retusa. It's no longer called that. Retusa is a separate ficus, and it is, in my opinion, the best version of microcarpa. So it was discovered in Taiwan and named Kinmen ficus, and it's basically sold over here as tiger bark ficus because of the stripes that are on the bark. I primarily grow them in like a semi-clip and grow way, using a lot of different techniques such as grafting, peg grafting, using air layers to kind of fuse things together. But a lot of different techniques. Really, I tend to tell people anything that works on a maple will pretty much work on a tiger bark or similar fig.
Okay. So everything from thread grafting, approach grafting, air layering, obviously air layering. They air layer really well from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Defoliation practices, because they do get pretty bushy. And I didn't know that they were also called retusa for a while. I didn't realize that was the same tree. It's kind of like, go ahead.
Oh, retusa is basically, think in the bonsai world, retusa doesn't exist. So it's not a fig that we use in bonsai. and so it was incorrectly applied to microcarpa early on, and so it's still kind of has some residual. It's still kind of working its way out, but it's now all microcarpa. So there's tons of different microcarpas out there. You can get melon seed, that's a microcarpa. Cuban laurel, that's a microcarpa. Chinese banyan, that's a microcarpa. And so all of these are microcarpa variants. Green Island ficus is a microcarpa. And so everything is just a version of the microcarpa fig.
So these could be considered just cultivars, or they
Cultivars.
just
Yeah,
okay,
they're cultivars.
Okay. And go as far as to call it that. But so they're all functionally they grow all the same kind of growth habit. Similar.
The way I describe it is like a lot of people, well, some people may not know this, is like Ulmus parvifolia. Chinese elm and corkbark elm are both Ulmus parvifolia, and they don't look anything like one another. They have a different leaf type, a different bark, a different growth habit, and they're both Ulmus parvifolia. So the best way it's been described to me as far as variants and things like that go is that everything's given the same library of DNA. So within the microcarpa family, they all have the same library of books. But then the order in which they read those books determines a lot of those characteristics without changing the speciation. So you can still be within the same species and be completely different, like breeds of dogs are all one species of dog.
Yeah. It's similarly like the Ulmus parvifolia. Yeah, you got the Seiju, and you got the Hokkaido, and you got the like you said, the Yatsubusa, the corkbark elm, and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm starting to see that now, because I mean, I just don't get to work with a lot of ficus. And I think the majority of the stuff that comes through here is tiger bark, and I've just been calling it ficus microcarpa this whole time, and didn't realize that my green gem or green mounds, those are probably two different species. I mean, two different cultivars in themselves too.
They are, yep,
yeah,
of microcarpa.
Yep. And so big variations, very big factors in those would be bark texture and leaf, if I'm correct.
Oh, so. Yeah, and tiger bark's my favorite. I think you can find trees with smaller leaves, but at the cost of hardiness. There's like a melon seed, to me, is a lot fussier of a tree than a tiger bark. A tiger bark is like the Mario of the ficus world. It has the best overall traits. It has the best like average trait in every area. And so it's my best all-rounder. And I think they handle the techniques the best. I think you can do some really advanced stuff with them, such as root grafts, fusion, peg grafting, stuff like that. And I think they lend themselves really, really well to beginners and intermediate students trying to take that leap into more advanced bonsai.
So when you said that they're hardier, so they probably have a little bit more of a broader range than most of your tropicals.
Yes, like I will say this. I don't want to like anybody saying they can grow them out in the winter or anything like that, out in freezing temperatures. But I will say that in the years where we get freezes, the hardleaf figs like the microcarpas seem to fare better than softleaf variants. So a softleaf variant being like a willow leaf fig or something like that. The Green Island ficus, the ficus microcarpa, all those trees seem to handle it a good deal better than some of the thinner leaved ficus.
Is there a chance you could defoliate your ficus in the fall and into the winter? It'll almost have a deciduous like habit.
No, I wouldn't do that. I would I mean you can defoliate them in the fall, but I wouldn't try to keep them as like having a defoliated crown through winter. So that would be very risky as far as keeping twigs healthy. So they're not designed to kind of stay dormant that long. And so you'd probably definitely have some twig dieback if they didn't push out. But normally I defoliate trees partially and so on throughout fall, throughout winter. And you got to play it by a case by case basis. And then also you got to sometimes roll the dice. I defoliated a tropical this year in the middle of winter that really bit me in the ass. So, sometimes it pays off, and sometimes you're like, well, I won't do that again.
Yeah.
So I would say for the most part, you're safe with partial defoliation. That's when you usually can do that any time of year.
And that just specifically means just thinning, basically.
No, I'm very specific. I when I say
Oh,
partial defoliation, I'm always referring to targeting the strong growth and weakening that, defoliating that 100%. Then
oh,
I
okay.
then I target medium growth and I defoliate that by like 50%. And then I target the weak growth and I make sure that that is left untouched. And so I basically am like leaving buds in key areas that are weak and then weakening strong growth around them to get them to push. And so
Okay.
that in and of itself is a very advanced technique that you see on black pines that a lot of people never thought to apply to tropicals until, the last 10 years or so.
So you'll be more apt to to thin out and balance more like a conifer because
Correct.
it is an evergreen, is what you're saying. The
Well, and
approach should be more like
it
that.
is all plants should be grown like that. They should all be grown. The idea in bonsai is to balance the vigor of the tree and make sure that everything is growing in a balanced regard within our control. So if I need to thicken the first branch, I should have the ability to move the energy to that first branch and allow that to start growing as the fastest branch on the tree. And that's accomplished by things like partial defoliation, by knowing that by weakening one area, you're strengthening another area. And so that is going to be key to, honestly, I would say that that's what's held tropical bonsai back for the last 20 years in the US, is
Mhm.
just failing to understand the importance of vigor maintenance and not caring. I'd say most of the people in tropical bonsai culture um, are very much in line with the silhouette pruning the tree, hedge pruning the tree. Branches that die, and the tree will eventually evolve into a what I call a Florida bunjin, where all your low branches have died, and you call it a bunjin because you don't have low branches. And to me, that's not a real bunjin.
Yep.
It's a tree that is quote unquote evolving into something that's not what it was originally intended to be. So I'm a purist in that regard, and I am a very big advocate of teaching people to like set your design, build your design, and build it in a way that you'll be able to maintain it for years and years and years and years and years.
Yeah. It's
So
it sounds similar to the struggle that I kind of see with bald cypresses here, where people just treat them as bulletproof. They treat them as, all right, I'm just going to whack this off. I'm just going to regrow it because it's fine. It's a strong plant. And like you said, you'll get to this point where it'll start evolving into something that doesn't really have a sustainable design. And this is something that we revisit that a lot. What's going to actually be long lasting? What's going to be something that the next generation is not going to have an issue with developing into something better and finer. And I say that in contradictory to the way that I develop flat top cypresses, which is not sustainable, but could be. But with tropicals, you could much easier follow the principles of design and sustainable designs.
yeah, I mean, I don't want anybody to think it's like easy, because it's almost like people used to think tropical was the easy bonsai. When I first went to nationals, tropicals kind of had a stigma to them. Like why do tropicals get a separate award? Why do they get their own award? I mean, I get that they're a separate tree, but you could just as easily say best broadleaf tree and award a tropical as a broadleaf.
Mm-hmm.
So you could eliminate a whole category and just have the tropicals play with the big boys and not have to create this separate award that's almost in a way, um, it, I'm going to get some heat for saying this, but in a way it's condescending to tropicals. It's condescending to say, and the attitude was very much of, oh, well, that's very nice for a tropical. And
Mm-hmm.
so the I've always found that very offensive, and I've always think that that's lit a fire under my butt to really pursue high level tropical design, to prove to them that people in the tropics do all the same work that people up north do. We do the partial defoliation, vigor balance, grafting, uh, fusing, air layering, ground layering, all the same stuff. And so I think where it comes from is people previously up north use their tropicals as a way to bide time until temperatures improve and they can get back to their quote unquote real bonsai. And so I think that that's where that stigma comes from, is that people didn't really give them a lot of care and did silhouette prune them for many years. And now we're kind of undoing this this kind of dogma, this stigma.
Yeah. Good hot take. A bonsai tree doesn't have to be an actual tree to be considered a purist bonsai. Like, for example, like shrubs, like Japanese boxwood. I mean,
Yeah.
could be amazing bonsai. A tropical, just because it's a ficus and you see one in someone's window of their home, doesn't mean that there's a variant out there of that ficus that could be an amazing bonsai tree. Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't think we'll get any heat from that. I'm kind of seeing a lot of progression in bonsai shows and stuff recently, like you had mentioned about why can't the tropical go into the broadleaf bonsai category. And I think I've seen pictures of tropicals winning the broadleaf category at recent shows and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and that's a good step forward. Yeah.
It is a big step forward because, I read an article with Michael Hagedorn. Basically, he's of the opinion. Now, I'm speaking for him, and I'm basically saying this based off of what I read. But from the article I was reading, is he was saying that the broadleaf trees that he's encountered in Taiwan are, in his opinion, more advanced than what he has encountered in Japan. Now, he did not say that they're better bonsai. He said that there are still better conifer and still more mochikomi, still more age to the trees in Japan. But as far as like broadleaf ramification, that was one thing that I did read in one of his articles. And that's an important topic as well. Is one of the things that causes people to not take things like tiger bark seriously, and it's a valid point, is that tropicals lack the age of conifers, and they always will. You'll never see a 6,000-year-old tropical. You really, I mean, there might be exceptions that, again, I might get heat for that. Somebody's going to email me a picture, but more often than not, you're not going to see that level of age. Whereas with conifers, certain conifers, you will see that level of age. And I think it's always important. Every time I talk, I'm going to touch on this, is that bonsai in Japan is practiced as the appreciation of age. So it is the appreciation of age over all else. And so if your tree doesn't make it to be old, and if it's not going to be as old as another tree, it's not going to be as valuable as that tree.
Yeah.
So it's that's a valid point. I can't argue that for my boys, the tropicals. We're young and we're fiery and we grow fast, and there are trade-offs, but that's where my heart lies, and I'll do everything I can to promote the love and passion for them.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm sure they can feel that.
Yeah.
It comes to another question in my mind about tropicals too, is we're talking about, we would like to see older mochikome. The life expectancy on most tropicals, I mean, they could be just as long as some of your larger scale like trees and other older plants, correct? So
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so that also adds to that, they'll accept a maple and whatnot, but also keep in mind that maples and more of those trees aren't the original bonsai subject. Or the original bonsai subject. There's a reason that in a Shohin display, a black pine always sits at top. And do you know that reason is, a lot of people will tell you that it's because, the black pine grows at the top of the mountain. That's partially true, but the real reason, why is it a black pine and not a white pine? It's because black pine is the king of bonsai.
It's the OG.
King. It's the OG, the original, the first subject of study. And so that's the one that dictates everything else. And so pines will always be the original, and they'll always be seen as the kind of the forefront of bonsai. They'll always be seen as exploring the concept of age the most.
So for history of tropical bonsai in Florida, we'll kind of get into that a little bit. I'm sure that could be a whole thing on its own. Where do you think, so who is the what is the king of tropical bonsai, and where do you think some of the first tropical stuff started showing up in Florida? Because I know, would you consider Florida to be the place for tropicals in the
Yeah,
United States?
I would say it is. I think we're the only place in the contiguous, the continental United States that has true tropical climate down in the Miami area, and the rest of the state is like a hot subtropical. So we tend to have the best environment for it, especially for certain species that grow in like countries like Vietnam and whatnot. They make a really easy transition to our climate. The king of tropicals, I would have to say ficus. Honestly, I would have to say ficus is the king of tropicals because it's practiced. If you don't have a ficus in your tropical bonsai collection, I would be shocked. Like if any practitioner out there didn't have a ficus in their collection, I would be shocked. It's something that's so ingrained in the culture of tropical bonsai. And I think even in countries like Taiwan, you'll still see like the kind of like the big four is what I say. One of the reasons why I always use a lot of ficus, a lot of premna, a lot of water jasmine, and a lot of sea hibiscus is I feel that there is a tropical culture, just like there's a Japanese culture of trees. And so when I travel and I ask people, name 3 Japanese bonsai trees, everybody can do it. I've never been stumped. I've never had anybody not be able to come up with 3 Japanese trees. Japanese black pine, Japanese maple, Shimpaku juniper, boom. Yeah. And you could go anywhere in the world and find people who are growing those trees for bonsai. And so they're unique. They go hand in hand. And so same with tropical bonsai. And that's what a lot of people who haven't read a lot of the literature realize is that if I go to South America and I go to Costa Rica, I'm going to find premna, I'm going to find ficus, I'm going to find water jasmine, and I'm going to find sea hibiscus. And so those are going to be kind of wherever I go, I'm going to find those. And there's a few others, but those are really the big 4. And I'd say the one that stands at the top would be tiger bark ficus.
So in a display of Shohin, your tiger bark would be on top.
Ooh, see, yeah, now
that's spicy.
That's spicy, yeah. So the problem is like something I've toyed with is at least for Florida. This is specifically for Florida, but the mountain theme, like a Shohin display, is built around the mountains, and everything in display in Japan is built around this like love and fascination of the mountains. And so in Florida, we don't have mountains, and so I always feel a bit inauthentic when I'm trying to build a Florida Shohin display. I always feel like this is so like backwards to me. And so what I would say is, would the ficus sit at the top? Under those paradigms of should the king sit at the top? Yes, the ficus should. But do I think that there are more prominent trees that maybe, like I think a buttonwood is a more reverent tree. I think a buttonwood demands, it might not have the impact in the wide range that ficus has, but I think it's closer to a pine and closer to the understanding of age that bonsai kind of warrants us to have. And so a buttonwood, I think, is again, this is controversial, but I think it's a truer form of bonsai.
And it's because of the collectability of buttonwoods.
It's because of when I should say that collected buttonwoods. I would say that usually you're collecting something because it has age. You're saving time. So I won't go collect seedlings. I'll grow a seedling. I don't need to go collect one. What I'll collect is something that I can't grow in my lifetime. And so a tree like that represents the concept of mochikomi and the concept of age very, very well. That really is a better study. So if you think of bonsai as a study of age, and we're just looking for examples of extreme age, well, then you start to see like the value that the Japanese see in bonsai. And you start seeing that a collected buttonwood that's 100 years old that grew very, very slowly is going to be a much more valuable and rare tree than a ficus that took me 6 years to grow. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so you would be more inclined to put your buttonwood at the top, and then the ficus is going to be is it going to be a strong form on your rack?
It would be a strong form, yeah. And I've toyed with the idea of doing linear display as far as Florida goes, because we tend to go from coastal habitat inland to pine hammock and swamp. And so instead of like thinking of a box where everything moves towards elevation, I thought about something more linear,
Hmm.
going across the tatami mat where the environment is changing from coastal to kind of more pine hammock and then changing to swamp. And so I don't know if I would need a king in that display. I think everything would be given its ample kind of room to shine.
And kind of its own hierarchy and its own element. So
And
the
I think it's important that we all start thinking that way, because one of the things Laurent, a big thing that I read in his book that I took away from it is uh, culturally appropriating can sometimes lead us to trouble.
Mhm.
Like I was just saying, I feel inauthentic displaying tropical trees in a mountain scene when I live in Florida where there's no mountains.
Yeah.
And so I'm appropriating something that I don't fully understand. I was never raised in the mountains. It's not a culture that's ingrained in me. Whereas if I start displaying my trees based around my environment and I start toying with the same Japanese themes, I'm not diverting too far from the theme, but start playing with how does my environment work? How do I display the various trees and how they occur?
Mm.
And
Is
so,
is this a
yeah,
project that you're coming up with to kind of maybe make a custom Shohin rack or
yeah,
display?
something
Um,
like that. And I don't know when this will come to fruition, but it is something that I think about often whenever I'm giving lectures on display and whenever I'm giving lectures on, in places that don't have mountains. I do a lot of
mhm.
Shohin display discussions, and we're talking about the Japanese fascination of mountains. And it almost feels like we're so desperate for their culture and not necessarily applying those same principles to our culture. And that's what it's really all about.
Mhm.
When we had Sammy on a couple weeks ago and we were talking about Suiseki, he mentioned something very similar where he said that he thought France had terrible stones. He thought, he was like, I'm not going to mess with my own stones, and everybody thought that there were no good Suiseki in France.
Mm.
And then he talked with some Japanese master who said, you have to learn to love your stones. And it's among the very same kind of concept where we have to learn to kind of love our environment and work to show our trees and our environment in a Japanese setting in that same appreciation of age.
Yeah. It's it's hard to blur the line between the obvious Japanese influence on our bonsai practice and then our local influence. That's where this is kind of heading towards, and
Yeah.
it's straying into another topic, but I'm totally digging it. But but yeah, I mean, I kind of struggle with that thought too. Is like if we're gonna display stuff here in Louisiana, it's got to even be way different from Florida because Florida, you
Right.
guys got the Everglades, which is just people who are not familiar with the Everglades kind of give them an idea what that's like. It's
It's an endless swamp of flat alligator infested water.
yeah, yep. You don't want to hang out there too late in the day. I imagine it's like an actual like kind of like
It
Amazonian kind
is,
of
yeah. There's
it's
pythons there. There's everything down there. So it's crazy.
and then you get down into the Florida Keys and that's like a whole different world too.
That's
That's
the
where a lot of
Caribbean.
buttonwoods come
Yeah,
from.
you're basically in the Caribbean then, and yeah, that's where a lot of the buttonwoods come from, and they get hit by hurricanes, they get hit by tides, they get just a terrible, miserable life for those buttonwoods until somebody comes and rescues them.
And it's that I think the buttonwood thing too is this is just kind of going off topic again, but I was kind of thinking about this the other day. I have people ask me every once in a while, like, how old is a buttonwood? And because one of the things that I get over here at the nursery, I get people come in and they want to look at the trees, and the question always is, how old is this? And then I'll go into this whole rant and I'll start talking about how this is kind of echoing the conversations that me and you've had several times, Mike, over and over about Yamadori and true age and deadwood that can't be replicated and stuff. And they're like, "So how old is this buttonwood?" And I'm like, "Well, crap, I don't know. Like how."
But but without killing the tree, there's no way to 100% know that.
Yeah.
So, there's no way to take a core sample and determine how that tree has how old it is. So the only thing you can do is extrapolate. You can say you can count, look at the grain, kind of get an idea of how tight it is. If you have experience, I've grown buttonwoods from cutting, I've grown them from seed, so I know how long they take to grow when they're happy. And I know that if a tree has been in a wooded area for 30 years and it's 2 feet tall, that tree's growing very, very slowly, for a buttonwood. And so you start to get an idea. You start to get like a rough idea of roughly how old are those trees going to be, because you start to extrapolate on how long did it take me to get bark on that branch. It took me 10 years. Okay, well, this one has bark that's 3 times as thick. So, you start taking these signs. And so there's no 100% accurate way to do it. You're basically just taking an educated guess. And I will say some of these buttonwoods are 30 years old, some are 50, some are definitely over 100 years old. And they're kicking butt and doing great as in bonsai pots. So
trunk caliber can attribute to buttonwoods as well. How big? Because I've seen them as barrier plants, planted like just as a native landscape type thing, and like where they are in your area. What's the maximum caliber on a buttonwood?
Oh, they'll get up to like a 30 foot tree, with a huge sprawling crown. And so when you see them, anybody who's interested, you can look up the Florida Keys State Champion Buttonwood, and you'll see it has these incredible life veins and this gnarled deadwood all over it. And it's a giant tree. And gives you a good idea of why they're so prized in bonsai. They really are survivors.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to go look that tree up. I mean, how big is the base on that tree, would you say?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, it's not going to compete with like a huge cypress or a redwood or anything like that.
A coastal oak or something.
No, nothing like that. But
it is obviously old.
It's an old big tree. And when you compare it to like the fact that a lot of the buttonwoods you're going to encounter and collect are like hedges, they're teeny. It's when you see them as big trees, it just shows you like some of them can grow super fast, super happy and healthy, and then you see these like old timers just struggling along with 3 leaves on them. Yeah. So
circling back around to ficuses. Am I wrong to say that I've seen big banyan style ficuses like in downtown Fort Myers?
Oh yeah. Okay. We actually have the record holder here in Fort Myers. We have the biggest one, I think, in continental US. I may be wrong, but it's I think like a few acres wide at the base of it.
Jeez.
And
wait, what?
I'm dead serious. It's because the way that they grow, as they grow branches horizontal, they also start to drop these aerial roots. And the aerial roots will, once they hit the ground, thicken and turn into trunks. And as they continue to thicken, they meet other aerial roots or other trunks, and they fuse to those. And so over 100 years, you get this like big, wide area with multiple trunks that are feeding it. So you get these huge that make a bigger kind of overall trunk.
Okay, because I saw one. I was in downtown Fort Myers, and I saw one next to like an old, like state building or political building, something like that. And it was sprawling, and I was like, "That's got to be a ficus." The thing was enormous. It had the really, really big, deep set looking kind of fluted base, kind of how the roots come out really wide. Yep. And I was like, "There's no way," because I had just assumed that type of ficus was more of a India or Malaysia. Yeah.
No, and there's a lot of different types. So banyan is a term that is used. There is a tree that's called true banyan, and that's Indian banyan tree, Ficus bengalensis. Okay. And that's the true banyan. Now, that's confusing because there are tons of other Eurostigma figs that will create quote unquote banyan trees that will create the same look. And so more often than not, banyan just refers to a Eurostigma fig, like a fig that has aerial roots that grows in that wide kind of strangler fashion.
And is that a down? I know that's called more of a cultural style of bonsai. It's not something that you would just look in the books and see. Um,
No, you've got to be like in the tropics. Like what you'll see is the only place I've really heard it called banyan style is in Florida. Most of the other thing now, the rules, I still see the same rules apply to the trees in Taiwan. So, like, what is banyan style? Banyan style is basically having a short crown that's twice as long as it is tall.
okay.
And you're basically, so think of it as your typical rule of threes tree, but I'm going to step on it and I'm going to squish it and
Mm,
it's going to blow out on the sides. And so I'm basically squishing it down, and all my branches are going to be tighter together. So, not barely any negative space between branches. And I'm going to focus on either aerial roots or Nabari.
mm,
And that's it. And the main difference between the way the Taiwanese do their banyan style and the way Florida does it is whether you're going to have aerial roots on the tree or not. I don't grow ficus with aerial roots. I'll just tell everybody that right now is it's not for me, and that's because I'm on this personal quest for like perfect taper, and that is a quest that I enjoy. That's what I get out of bonsai. It's
mm,
the way I enjoy the hobby, and so I don't like aerial roots because that messes up my taper. And so for me, I'd rather focus on the roots at the Nabari and graft and make a really powerful Nabari and not have any aerial roots. However, there are a lot of people who love them. There are countries in like Indonesia, they're real big on them. And there are certain looks, like you won't get the banyan, the true banyan look without aerial roots.
mm.
So it's you always have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Do I care? Do I care that I'm going to get reverse taper? Some people argue that without the aerial roots, it's not a true banyan.
Yeah.
So people can take it however they want and kind of pursue the growth of ficus and whatever makes them happy. I personally don't like them, but that doesn't mean I would grade a tree lesser because they had them.
Um, so when it comes to styles, like there's the cultural styles from where they're grown into the banyan, which is now we know that's completely separate, its own thing on its own, but it has different appreciations, which you just described with the aerial roots versus not. Other stylings of ficus. So as we wrap up our conversation about tiger barks, what other forms and styles do you appreciate them or find them best suited for?
I'm really a sucker. I mean, I'm a sucker for like a strong, upright banyan style ficus, but they can be used for just about anything. I personally don't like using them for bunjin. I think that
I don't
they
see a lot of them as bone gin,
oh,
but
I do. I see quite a few, and
hmm,
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that bunjin is a very specific style that really think of it as like the most wabi sabi style there is,
yeah.
and so it's the style that really dictates a strong amount of age, a strong amount of character, and a ficus is just very soft to me to be
Hmm.
literati. Feels too soft. But again, I'm speaking from opinions. I do like them as root over rocks. I think they make fantastic root over rocks, fantastic exposed root. What else? Obviously, slanting style,
Hmm.
informal upright. I don't like using formal upright in tropical trees. It's not most tropical trees don't grow formal, so
Yeah.
more often than not, they're going to grow very informal, and so I
It's
tend to
a little bit
avoid that.
more of a bold feeling for such, like you said earlier, like a softer feeling tree.
Yeah,
Is a formal
exactly.
upright, yeah. And
Yeah, and it's not. It just doesn't feel true to the nature of a ficus. They're very undulating.
mhm,
So,
naturally moving back and forth. Whereas you do see the on unfortunate S curve ficus a lot, I'm
yeah,
sure. And like that's just so easy just to be like back and forth, switch back movement here. But
yeah,
they will do that to an extent on their own, from what I've
sure.
seen. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll do all sorts of weird things when they're growing, and they're really really unique trees. I mean, I really do love ficus. I think that's like I said, one of my favorites. I think just their ability to fuse so easily. I mean, I have a few tiger barks. You guys can go back on my Facebook and look a few months ago where I literally took a threaded screw and I just screwed two Shohin together and they're already fused.
Mm,
This was just a few months ago. So I just made my Shohin like 4 inches bigger. So
I
yeah,
mean, like you said, they just don't care if they're touching each other and they get happy and they start growing. I mean, they
yeah.
just go for it. Yeah. I
Which
mean,
that brings me to a good thought though. You just thank you because you were asking about styles. One thing to avoid is if you are trying to go with like a threaded or braided look, if you are trying to,
ooh,
or if you're trying to do a, how do I word this? If you're trying to do like a corkscrew or a spin or any kind of movement in the tree, care needs to be taken that the two coils do not touch each other because it will fuse and then you'll be
yep,
left with like a big ball
yep.
and you won't have this like nice movement. You'll just have a big fused ball.
Well,
So
I have to go and see what that looks like when one is done properly, like you're saying.
yeah, so basically you don't want to like over thicken them if you put movement into them to where the two sides touch, because then you just get a big donut that fuses together.
I'll have to see. I don't have the pleasure of viewing that many attempted ficuses in that style. It just makes me laugh to kind of think about the over exaggerated things that you probably have seen, and the donut tree is kind of interesting to me. I'm also
Yeah,
hungry. It's getting close to
me
dinner
too.
time.
My stomach's rumbling and I'm thinking about donuts and yeah,
And don't want to bite into the ficus because they do have latex in them. So
they do. Yeah, they're pretty
be
nasty.
be careful with that. But yeah, I think one of the ones that you didn't mention, it's probably not a preferred style then, I guess, is forest plantings.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't even
Okay.
think about that. So
Yeah.
force plantings would be awesome. Again, you just need to keep in mind that you will not have the luxury of resetting trees very easily because the roots are going to fuse together.
Yeah, it's gonna become like
So
a plate.
it's going to come become like a plate, and you're going to repot it year after year after year as like one tree.
Hmm.
And so, if you're planning on adding trees or you're planning on like separating it and using it, you basically have to saw it into pieces. So
Hmm.
it can be a little trickier, but it's never stopped me from using them in forest material. I think they're awesome. Yeah.
Um, one of the well, a couple of episodes back, I can't remember how many it is now. Me and Carmen covered clump styles, and if you get to that issue where you do have a Cineus just connected base, um, I guess you could kind of aim them towards that if you really found it like difficult to separate them again.
Yeah.
So clump
And I
styles are appropriate as well.
clump styles are awesome. Clump styles are something that, a lot of times when we get into bonsai, we don't like it, but that's a great style that's underutilized. I really, really think it's cool. So that's another style I didn't think to mention that's really useful for ficus is clump style.
It shows like a really unique way to show age in something that formerly was juvenile, but then kind of reached its potential feel in its life and the way that it looks. It's kind of how that's how clump styles make me feel.
Yeah.
I did a lot of talking on the other episode about it, but just touching on it lightly, it's just clump style, like you said, underutilized. Like I go up to the Pacific Northwest when I visit Carmen and Michael, and I see beautiful clump styles, especially deciduous clump styles. And yeah, I think there should be definitely more of them.
Well, people are put off, and I understand why. But people are put off, especially beginners, with multi-trunk plantings. So
Mm.
if it's something that has multiple trunks on it, it's a lot more confusing. And so one of the things I'll tell you, the listeners, to kind of help them out with group plantings is you always first want to look at the structure of a tree and determine whether you're dealing with trunks or branches, because you can make that decision on your own. Anything can be a trunk or a branch. If you've decided that they're trunks, let's say I have 3 trunks, don't close your eyes, but kind of think of one of the trees and ignore the rest and just
Hmm.
focus on designing that one tree as a bonsai, that one trunk as a bonsai. Then move on to the next one, make that into a bonsai. Move
Um,
on to the third, make that into a bonsai, and then kind of see where you're have too many branches, see where you're kind of running into things, and make some appropriate actions to kind of thin out some of those crossing branches. And that's usually the best place to start as a beginner for starting to understand group plantings.
yeah. So take take what Mike said there, and make sure you're not driving your vehicle and listen to our podcast,
Yeah.
and close your eyes pull over,
Close your eyes.
pull over first, and then close your eyes. Yeah, but I think that's something that a lot of people that get into bonsai earlier is visualization and pre-planning and breaking down that structure in your mind. Um, I mean, if you're uncomfortable with closing your eyes and trying to be imaginative, some people are just not, they can't imagine things like that. They're a little bit more pneumatic. They want to take a picture of the tree
Sure.
and erase trunk lines with their markup on their phone or something. Whatever it takes to kind of start visualizing the lines in the trunks.
Yeah,
Like
I
you
mean,
said.
because it is really confusing, dealing with a lot of different branches, a lot of different trunks, all running into each other. You don't know what's going to be the right one to cut off, what's going to be the right one to save. But I usually tell people to slow down. That's the first thing I say is slow down. Look at the tree objectively and start removing everything on the tree that you 100% know you are not going to use in the design. So 100%. And I always ask them, like, you're going to use branches on the inside of a curve? And they say, no. Okay, remove every single one of those. And so once you kind of get through removing all the noise, you're left with a much cleaner vision. And then you can start applying what you want out of the tree.
Yeah.
So that's usually how I recommend group plannings and approaching those.
Yeah. Cool. So we're getting towards the end of today's episode, but we would do some listener questions, but I'd like to let them accumulate a little bit more, and maybe we can get Carmen on for a future episode, and we'll go pick through a few of those. And we don't have any critiques. We had some fun critiques, but we've had 2 bald cypresses. Well, actually, wait, nope. There was 1 dawn redwood and 1 bald cypress. Like I said earlier in the episode, you can go to our Instagram, Little Things for Bonsai People, and you can go see those critique trees there. They're listed by what number episode coordinates with. But if there's any listeners out there that wants Mike to kind of go through and look at a tropical, I mean, he's your man to do that. I mean, I could look at a tropical and kind of tell you how I feel about their design, but there's something about tropicals that is very nuanced that maybe Mike could even just bring you into a different direction. Because I mean, each species, each tropical is going to have its own particular attribute or characteristics that they're going to really be able to show off.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true.
Yep. So listener critiques, we're ready for them. Just, email them to me. You can email to evan@underhillbonsai.com, or you can email them to Mike. Make sure you tell him that it's for the podcast, because I'm sure he gets a bunch of emails a day about bonsai. What's your email for that?
It's Mike Lane Bonsai @gmail.com.
Yep. So email those over there. We'd love to get a couple more critiques. Those were a lot of fun. Yeah, sorry you couldn't be in on some of the critiques, Mike, but maybe we can get you some.
Oh, that's all right, man. I'm sorry. It was just crazy. I forgot I had COVID too, so that was
a revisit of COVID coming back from India.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, on the flight back, I was a 20-hour flight, and I was just getting sick with COVID.
20 hours on a plane, stuck in isolation, just developing.
Feverish and
and you're just like looking at everybody else on this plane. You're like, oh,
I'm like, I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm so sorry, but I didn't know I had it at the time. I just thought I was getting a cold or something, so wasn't too terrible. But
well, glad you're feeling better. I mean, that's also been a couple weeks past, so
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm well better now, and happy to be back on the podcast. Happy to be back on the train.
Yeah, excellent. Let's knock out our bonsai word of the week for just a moment, and then we'll kind of say some closing remarks. So I chose Suiban.
Yeah, Suiban.
So I knew a little bit about this. Mike kind of filled me in a little bit earlier before we started, but tell them what a Suiban is.
So a Suiban is basically a bonsai pot without drain holes, and so what they're used for is, if I wanted to do a rock planting, like a Psyche, it would be a good display pot because you don't need drain holes when you're displaying a Psyche. It's also very, very useful for Suiseki display. So if you like to collect stones but you don't always have the ability to make a diaza or a little stand for the individual stone. You get a few suaban or just one suaban, and you get some nice sand, not like play sand. You get some nice like brown sand that'll look nice, and you will display the stone in the middle of the sand. And so it's like a very classy way of displaying your stones that you've collected, that maybe haven't had a diaza, or maybe one that maybe you don't want to select a front to the stone and you just want to be able to show it in various orientations. It's very helpful to be able to show it in the sand tray. They're sorry, they're usually elaborately glazed on the bottom too. So if you don't fill them with sand, you can see this like nice pretty pattern when you plant your psyche in it. And so it's basically like another way of framing the tree or art piece.
Psyche versus Suiseki.
So Psyche is where we are actually planting a tree on a rock. So not a root
Okay.
of a rock, because its roots will not be in contact with soil below. It won't go over. It will go into a small pocket in a rock, and it will survive in that little pocket. And so that's a Psyche. And then the rock is positioned in a suaban for display, usually affixed in a number of different ways. But that's a Psyche. And a Suiseki is the appreciation of stones. So all that means is like the best way I got into it was just like bonsai is seeing a big tree in miniature, you're seeing a mountain in miniature. So a lot of, and it's not always going to be mountains, but that's a good way to kind of start, is you're shrinking mountains. And so Suiseki is a way of kind of, when you're out in the woods enjoying the trees, you can also hunt for beautiful stones, so.
And I feel like a suaban can also show like a coastal boulder
Yeah,
or old lava
it can.
runoff like rock.
Yeah,
So
you can show a lot of different things in a suaban. It's like it's a good tool to have for just general display purposes, you
mm.
know.
And you're specifying that the suaban needs to be glazed, or is there other options?
Doesn't have to be. No, there's actually antique ones. There used to be ones made of bronze. Bronze suabans are very sought after. They don't have to be glazed on the bottom, but it's a nice touch when it's glazed on the bottom. It's think of that as the bottom is part of the aesthetic you're going to see. Whereas like we care very much about the sides of the pot usually. Now the primary surface area is going to be that big inside of the pot. So that's going to be the area where we want the decoration.
Yeah. And suabans could be tiny, they could
Mm-hmm.
be larger. What is kind of like what's the limit? I mean, it's kind of hard to say because it is almost limitless. There's also
Yeah,
different shapes and
I
stuff.
haven't seen a limit. Big Suiseki, I've seen them in big Suaban.
Hmm.
So I have not seen a realistic limit to the size of a Suaban.
Yep. However big your stone, or however big your
Yeah.
planting in a stone is, which was that's a new word to me. What was that one?
Which one? Oh, Psyche.
Sake, yeah.
Yeah.
I we're kind of just throwing bonsai words of the week all over the place right now.
Yeah, we're bonsai dictionarying them.
Yep. But it's fun because whenever I talked to Jennifer a couple episodes back, and we did the bonsai word of the week, she was like, "Whoa, I'm learning something right now. This is awesome." I was like, "Yeah." So it's always cool to just kind of bring us back to earth and be and appreciate the words that come from Japanese culture and help us kind of train our eye and our mind into how to appreciate bonsai and other bonsai adjacent practices and art forms. It goes a long way. So, well, awesome. Thanks for getting together with me, Mike.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get you back on. Me and Carmen and Mike will hopefully be jamming in the next couple of episodes. I know next episode we're going to have to unfortunately be separate again. We're going to be doing a bonsai forms
Mhm.
episode. We're going to talk about another style that we can use in bonsai, and then we should be looking forward to another guest artist soon.
All right.
Yep, I don't know who it is yet, but it's in the works. So thanks again, Bonsai Best Buds. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to become a Bonsai Best Bud, you know where to go. Patreon.com/little things for bonsai people. And thanks for hanging out, Mike. I'll catch up on the next one.
Thank you, guys. See you guys in the next one.
Yeah, dude. All right. We'll see y'all.